Murray, you sent a link from Midi Olympique into the group about Joel Judge confirming that World Rugby might do the same system as Super Rugby now for yellow or red cards for the Rugby World Cup. So to be using a bunker and orange cards, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Like, is this something that maybe it's irrelevant whether you'd be in favor of it or not, but do you think it would be the kind of thing that most rugby fans would be okay with, or do you see it as being maybe a contentious introduction?
Broadly speaking, I think it would be welcomed by certainly those in the game, but also, as you mentioned, supporters who, when their team is involved, get increasingly frustrated about decisions that still are being adjudicated incorrectly, I suppose. And we're seeing that after the fact with red cards being rescinded and that kind of thing, or players being suspended having not been sent off during a game. This is still regularly happening. So I think, broadly speaking, yeah, it probably would be a good thing. It would take some of the pressure off, and with the World Cup looming and the hope that a game isn't decided by an incorrect, or isn't influenced by an incorrect decision, it makes sense. I suppose I have some concerns around it tentatively. I think I've mentioned before that I'm not always comfortable with the referee not having that responsibility anymore. And I think it'd be really important that the people who are in that TMO bunker are the most qualified possible. And in fact, I think it would be even worthwhile using referees who aren't adjudicating that World Cup match on the pitch, having them in the bunker, because you want the best match officials possible in those rows in the bunker. The other bit is, like we saw at the weekend with the Angus Blythe one in Super Rugby, where he was shown yellow card, which is the system they're using. So the ref gives him a yellow and says, off you go, we'll have another review of that. And it gets upgraded to red card, in that case, a 20-minute red card. And then he's been banned for 3 weeks. But I still think it looks wrong. I think it's wrong that he's not just red carded when it's really clear and obvious. And that's just the aesthetics of it, really. But I think in a sport where we're really determined to show that we're treating player welfare as the utmost priority, just give the red when it's that obvious. I think that's a simple thing to do. And that's the last bit of it. I just hope that this doesn't include the 20-minute red card portion of Super Rugby system. That wasn't mentioned in the Joe Judge interview at all. No mention of 20 minutes. So I'm not a fan of that. I know a lot of people are, but I think a red should be permanent.
What about yourself, Bert? Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with Murray. I'm not a favourite of 20-minute red card, a punishment at all. When the Stormers were over and I met the coaches, they were ahead of the curve on this. They were very confident that this was going to come in for the World Cup, and I was a little bit more sceptical. Sometimes I feel World Rugby are reticent to make changes late. That the laws are kind of have a while to settle in a little bit. But I suppose if it's the right thing, I think there's a massive fear now because there's so many errors being made around not so many, there's been some high profile errors made around red cards, and I think the World Rugby are very conscious that pressure is already on referees to make right decisions, plus obviously improve player safety and show that that's something that's absolutely non-negotiable. That they don't want the World Cup to be about incorrect or correct red cards, or probably incorrect ones more so. So I can see why they would bring this in. I totally agree with Murray as well. I think given the fact that there's a limited amount of referees who are of the standard you would feel to be able to make these decisions. I also would be in favor of getting them double jobs. So ref on a Friday and TMO on a Saturday, if they can, because it's going to ramp the pressure up on TMOs, and even with slow-mos and extra angles, I still think that's a huge amount of pressure for people maybe who aren't experienced enough to do it. So that's going to take a little bit of work, but in general I'm in favor. But I'm in favor of anything we can do to get the right decisions made during the game, to be honest. And if this is going to have higher percentage of right decisions, well then I'd back it.
The referees are probably screaming at us, thinking about referee welfare and their chance to have a break in between mentally taxing games, but that makes the most sense. The other bit just to mention is that the early data from Super Rugby suggests that this measure, the yellow card review process, as well as a couple of others, has helped speed up the game. There's less dead time in the game. You're seeing it even on the instances where this comes into play. The referee has, I think, a maximum of 3. I've only seen them review 3. I hadn't seen that written anywhere. And then they show the yellow and they indicate for the additional TMO resource. There have been more than one TMO person in the kind of room to make sure that they're watching live stuff as well as the review stuff. But I think it makes sense to have that kind of souped up bunker where there's a couple of refs even maybe. And Joel Judge, he did allude to it being really difficult to, who's got the final say if you've got several people in the room. That makes it slightly muddy. And there are a few other concerns around it. But it does sound like this is happening. He said the Rugby Championship in the summer is another chance to try it at a level up. And if that goes well, we'll see that at the World Cup. So, yeah, it'd be interesting for people to get in touch with us and see if they're in favour of this, because I think it'll be widely welcomed.
Birch, when you mentioned that the Stormers guys were pretty confident that this would be brought in when you spoke with them a few weeks back, would this be something that individual unions are campaigning for, or is this a World Rugby creation? Like, how does that process go?
Look, I'm sure World Rugby are doing their own analysis of what works best, but certainly my understanding of it was that the South Africans as a union, whether that's through Razzie or maybe not Razzie, maybe through someone else in the box, Felix or whatever, and then Dobson himself was having these conversations, and I look at that's how politics works in sport. It's the four big franchises and the SRU sit down together and go, look, SARU sit down together and go, what's best, and then you start to lobby, and you start to make your case, and you ring Joel Juge and you ring Phil Davies and you have those chats, and suddenly it builds a bit of momentum. I hadn't heard what the Irish viewpoint on it was, where Andy Farrell sits on it, etc. But certainly from the conversations I had with them, and now look at Joel Juge is very smart. He gives that interview, it drip feeds out into the public domain, and they sense as well what the reaction is to it, and he can be sure he's getting calls from Fabien Galtier today, if he hasn't already spoke to him about it, from some of the top 14 coaches. And yeah, they'll just be sounding out what the participants, which is coaches, players, kind of feel about it. And if it's more in favor, I think then I think they have the power obviously to run it through anyway. But I would get the sense that this is going to happen now based on the fact that he's kind of leaked it to a certain extent.
I can't see any coach really being against it, to be honest, given that their team could fall foul of it. And the very last thing to add, Gav, is if this does happen, we have to be able to hear the referee in the stadium, and not just by buying a ref link. Like, it has to be really well communicated, because obviously the player's gone off the pitch, and if it's been upgraded to red, I think it really helps everyone to understand how they came to that decision. And all it needs to be is 2 sentences when he's speaking to the captain. I think it would be really positive, actually, if you could hear the ref in all those instances without having to fork out 10 or 15 quid for a ref link, because why should you miss out by being at the game? You need to be privy to all that decision making and why things have happened.